Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Canmaking News. Today I'm in conversation with Christopher McKenzie, who is the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Marketing Officer for the SLAC Group. My name is Janice Osborne and I'm the publisher of Canmaking News. Christopher, how are you? Should I call you Christopher or Chris?
Janice, I've always been known as Chris.
Yes. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm blessed to be in Australia, so we're lucky here with the COVID situation. Although we're on lockdown at the moment until next Sunday, we are relatively safe, and so we're happy, and it's been good to be home for the last 18 months.
Yes, because I know you travel an awful lot.
Yes. 2018, which was 2019 was the last year I traveled extensively, and I did 10 and a half months on the road, whereas in 2020 I got back here on March the 3rd, and I've been here ever since.
So what's it like being there ever since? Is it quite a shock to the system?
It wasn't at first. I managed to embrace technology, and I found that works well for me and for the company. I'm not saying that it's the answer for everything. In fact, I find that, if anything, I work harder than I used to, because I used to be able to at least close the door on the plane and have some time to myself, yes. Whereas now it's a long day. So you start off Zoom meetings in the morning with the USA, and then you have Asia Pacific throughout the day, and then in the evening you move on to Europe. So life is what is harder, but probably, dare I say, are you getting more results? Are you doing more? The whole market at the moment, it's a different time, because the whole industry at the moment is remarkably busy. There isn't any of my competition or myself which are slow at the moment, and so it's abnormally busy. As far as harder work and is it better this way, time will tell. Yes, it's a hard question to answer, isn't it, really? So what I'm going to do now, let's go back to the beginning. I mean, it's so lovely to chat with you after all these months. I mean, I haven't seen you for ages. I don't know when we last met, probably about 2-3 years ago. It was probably in London, if I remember. But what I wanted to ask you about, first of all, is to know a little bit more about you. I mean, I've seen what you've done throughout the years because I've known you for such a long time. But what I'd like to do is for you to tell our listeners about Chris McKenzie. You are a legend. You've been around for so long. Well, I think you are. I don't remember the can-making industry without you. Every time I turned a corner at an exhibition or a show, there was Chris. More or less, anyway. So let's go back to the beginning, because tell me about your background and how you got into this, Chris. Well, yes, I've known you since I had hair. Well, yeah, exactly. On top and not here. I was an army brat. So my father was military, and all my siblings were military. I grew up in the Far East in Singapore. We were in Singapore from 1956 to 1966, and it was a different place. We ended up, sort of going back, working through he worked through the Middle East, and then into Europe for a short time, and then ended up in Bermuda, which is, sort of close. It's one of the few protectorates which didn't have prior human existence before the British protectorate took over. Yeah. I was lucky enough there to win a scholarship and was in a private school, which was wonderful. And then from there moved to the UK to follow my siblings and become part of the military myself. I was taken into the Royal Academy of Sandhurst to become an officer for the Royal Engineers. After my stint in the army, I came out and gravitated towards engineering for obvious reasons. At that time, I was working for a company called Preferred Tooling, and I was technical manager for a large conglomerate of Japanese tool suppliers, Sumitomo, Mitsubishi, Nachi, and I supported the industry right throughout, from aerospace and automotive, right through general industry to can making. Out of all of them, I fell in love with can making. So why was that? It's an industry which gets into your blood. And if you speak to anybody who's been in the industry for a while, they'll tell you that people either love it or hate it. If you last for the first year, then you're in it for life. It gets into your blood. For those people who don't like it, they get out quickly. After that, I was approached by a company which I think was the first time we came across each other, a company called Stewart Ironsides, or D.H. Stewart.
Yes, it was.
They supplied lubricants to can-making industry, and they wanted somebody who had hands-on experience on body makers and cuppers and equipment. And I worked for them, predominantly looking after Europeans beverage industry, where I made a lot of wonderful friends in CMB, Wrexham, small molecular tobacco at the time. And from there, we progressed through to Asia. And in Asia, I lived in Malaysia for a long time with my family, where we supported the industry in there. And I was eventually poached over by Henkel and became their technical director for Asia Pacific. When my contract had finished with them, I moved to Australia. And in Australia, I ended up working through CMB, yes, which was a wonderful time, through to Stolly. And Stolly, I was their sales director for Asia Pacific. And that was up until 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, I finally succumbed to offers and approaches by SLAC to become part of their team through a dear friend of mine, Richard Moore.
Yeah.
And I've been with them ever since. I joined as their chief marketing officer, and then 3 years ago, I took on the mantle as well of chief operating officer, looking after their international division.
So what does a chief operating officer do? Are you the right-hand man, basically?
We're just a team. So we have a board of directors, and we have C-level directors, of which my responsibility is looking after the commercial side as CMO for the group, and then chief operating officer. The job of that is to look after and ensure the smooth running of our international division, which goes from Hong Kong down to Italy to the UK to the USA.
Right. So now that we're talking about that, tell me about the business and SLAC, because it's grown dramatically since 2004 when it was first established. And how is the business doing? I mean, since you bought Karima, Intercan and OKL, how has this improved business, and what is the situation now with SLAC? Are there further future developments that we should be looking for?
Let me see. So as you know, we did a great leap forward in the years 2016 to 2018.
Yeah.
I was brought in to assist the company to grow. We acquired, first of all, back then, Karima, which has not only grown within its own product range, but we've recently increased the size of the property and moved it closer to Bologna, it was originally based in the beautiful village of Ferrara, which is about 45 minutes from Bologna. The new offices are about 25 minutes from Bologna, and is vastly increased, ready to produce our not only the Karima products, but also the SLAC products for Europe. The next thing we acquired was Dayton, Ohio, which was a joint venture with Thomas, as you know.
Yes, Thomas from ICS, yes.
Jimenez, yeah. Thomas Jimenez from ICS. With his help, we then moved on to acquire OKL, which at the time was suffering. We wanted to take OKL into the family for about 2 years, and that didn't happen in the way we would have preferred it. We wanted to acquire it as a going concern. Unfortunately, decisions made by the management at the time took too long, and the company went into a liquidation situation. So we ended up quickly having to look after all of the people who work for them, because the biggest problem with the bankruptcy isn't the company. You can always take the name. You can always buy new equipment. You can always have a new building. You can't replace the people within the company. And we knew that people within the company had mortgages to pay, they had families to feed. So we had to work within a very, very short, tight schedule to get them safe and secure, so we didn't lose them to our competition or to other industry, which we managed to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Out of the original 34, we managed to save 29 of them.
Did you?
Yes. And now we have a portfolio of about 48 people.
Wow.
And OKL is our main hub in USA, as is Karima in Europe. And then, of course, we're looking for experience in decoration, which was the only part of our portfolio which we felt we had a gap. And so we talked to another old friend of mine, Peter Strode at Intercan, and we, after long discussions, he joined the family as well. And so now the family spans China, Hong Kong, Italy, UK, Dayton, Ohio, and Cincinnati. Those are the beverage division. Obviously, there's a lot more interesting parts of the company which are not involved with the beverage division, which covers across China. But today we're here to talk about the beverage division.
The beverage division, yes. Well, that's your main business. So what I was going to say to you is that it's extraordinary how the company's grown, but I have a question which also I've heard from others, and it's an interesting point of view. So you're buying smaller companies, and this is happening an awful lot in the industry, isn't it? Larger companies are buying the smaller companies and helping them, as you explained. But how do you feel about this? Because how do your competitors feel? Because at the end of the day, surely there's room for smaller companies to exist on their own right.
Well, there's that old argument. I didn't start the argument. We just carried it on. Yeah. And I think the biggest argument back in the day was always against Stolly.
Yes.
Because Stolly made the most acquisitions. And whether it be Stolly or Belvac or SLAC,
yes.
When we go to things like Canex these days and we say, oh, I remember when these used to be bigger. And it's not because there are less people. It's just that there are less tents,
yes,
less stands, because that acquisitions have moved together, and so that what used to be 20 booths is now only one booth. And I understand what you say, and it does cause concern, not with our competitors, but with our customers. As John Hayes once said back in, I think it was 2016, John said, "We like to be the largest can maker in the world. We don't like our suppliers to be the largest in the world."
Yeah.
Because of course, as you start acquiring people, what you intend to do is you. Personally, I think what you do is that you lose competition.
Yes.
But more importantly, there was a long time when all of that happened before SLAC came along, where not only did you lose competition, but you lost innovation, because one of the main reasons for innovation is war, in this case between competitors. Mm. The greater competition you have, the more you have to innovate to be along. I think it was the law of change.
Keeps you on your toes.
Yeah. Everything and everybody is constantly changing, so therefore if you don't change, you will be surpassed. And what SLAC has done is come to the table, has given that new level of innovation, that new competition. And we were lacking a few parts of our portfolio, and so we've acquired people, or we've brought them into the family. We haven't duplicated, so that we haven't bought parts of the companies which are just for the sake of removing competition. So we haven't got two body maker companies apart from OKL, because OKL has a different type of body maker.
Yes.
We haven't got two decorator companies. We haven't got two press companies. So what we've got is we've started off with a company which had a great portfolio, and we found small gaps within that portfolio. And then we filled those portfolios, those gaps with new acquisitions. And so now we're probably, because of the way we've done it, we've got the largest breadth of the industry in any of our competition,
yes,
which has worked well for us. I think that had we not done what we'd done with the people we'd done, I think we would have lost some good companies, which would have been sad.
Yes, that's a very good point, actually. I was going to say you've probably helped in more ways than one.
Today's sponsor of episode 3 of Canmaking News and Conversation is Suzy SLAC, who design and produce high-end precision equipment for the canning industry. For more information, please visit SLAC, that is slac.com.cn. And now, back to the podcast.
So, for the future, I mean, what are your plans? Is there anything you can tell me about that you might be thinking about doing?
Well, we're a public listed company, so the answer to that would be no.
No.
But we're constantly looking at improving what we do. I would say that probably one of the things, not in the beverage industry, but one of the things we're doing a lot with, which you'll see us move into in Europe and the USA, is the battery, the electric car division, where we supply. Yeah, so we're making batteries for the electric car automotive industry.
What do you think about the electric car? Out of interest, what's your personal view on this?
I think that it should have happened years ago, because it's something which is, it's hard to say, because if you look at the innovation side, it's better than fuel. It's better than fossil fuel. But having said that, in order to charge batteries, of course, you have to use electricity, and electricity uses fossil fuel as well. So it's a vicious circle. I think that eventually when we have good, clean electricity that we can charge our electric cars with, then it's a great idea. And I'm personally, I'm all for it, because I think that having lived through the time back in the UK when you couldn't see 2 feet in front of you because of a steel mill or the amount of lead in the air, to where we are today, it's a different world.
I haven't got one. People are buying them. It's obviously how it's going to be. Do you think it's going to really take off? Are people really going to have nothing but electric cars in the future? No,
laws have been made. And I know that China and the UK and Australia, we've all made laws that there'll be no new cars which are fossil fueled after a certain time, and that we must be fully electric by another time. And I think that the latest date I've seen is 2035, yes, which is not that far away.
No.
It does seem like it's different to what we do, but it's not. We're making batteries using the same process as making cans, which is what's groundbreaking, what's innovative. They used to be done just by what's called impact extrusion, where you just hit a slug and it displaces the metal and produces the battery case. Whereas what we're doing now is using the same process we use for can making, which means that we run at high speeds and efficiently. So it makes the whole process a lot more beneficial to the industry, whereas prior to this has gone through 3 phases. So we went to the old, which started off, I think, with Tesla, using the Chinese, which would take a whole factory of about 100 people. We then went through what's called drawing a DRD, which is using big presses through many processes to get the same idea, and now to what we do, which is using can-making technology to do it very fast and very easily.
It's quite extraordinary what SLAC is doing. I don't think the rest of the industry really realise how diverse you are as a company. So that leads me on to the next question, which really is, so how much do you spend on R&D? Do you have a budget set aside for this?
We don't have a budget. We R&D is a matter of what's needed and what's necessary. So as you know, over the last 5 years, our R&D has been extensive.
Yeah.
We've produced the Boxer body maker, which is being commercialized at the moment. The Tata steel line, the digital decorator, the SLAC optimized end, the battery field. The reason why we do so much R&D is that being a Chinese company run by an international board of directors, I suppose in 2016, 2017, we got a bit annoyed and fed up with the constant blurb of competition saying, oh, but they're just a Chinese copy company. And so what we did was say, okay, we can either fight that or we can disprove it. And so the best way to do it was to disprove it. And so instead of putting our money into fighting and saying, no, we're not a copy company, the best way to deal with that was to become innovative. And as a result of that, we lead the field in innovation. And people like you have seen it and said, well, these guys aren't copies, they're actually leading the field now.
No, this is interesting because there is a stigma attached to Chinese companies in the industry, and it's a pity. Because you're right, it's hard to get rid of that, isn't it? But you've managed to do it, which is interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, you like me remember the Japanese transistor radio and how everything was cheap that came out of Japan.
Yeah.
In fact, to this day, we still use the analogy of when you do a business card of the Japanese transistor radio, in that the cheaper the transistor radio, the more garish the box used to be.
Yes.
Whereas the simpler the box was, then the better the technology inside it. And look where Japan is now. I also lived through Taiwan. I remember Taiwan being the supplier of cheap products and copy products throughout the world, as they thought at the time. Taiwan is one of the leading companies in the world, countries in the world for innovation in electronics.
Yes.
Look at Hong Kong. Do you remember Hong Kong?
Yes.
Everything out of Hong Kong was cheap and nasty, apparently. But they clawed with their way to the top. And China now are beginning to prove that they are the supplier of strong quality products.
So can I ask you this then? How do you find working with the Chinese?
Well, I worked with the British, I worked with the Americans, and I worked with the Chinese.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own culture.
Yes.
Being a child of the world, where I'm
well travelled.
I'm stuck somewhere between, as a culture, I'm stuck somewhere between British, Bermudian, Australian, and American. I've taken it in my stride. Growing up in Singapore and living in Malaysia for so long, being part of the Asia Pacific region, I find them a pleasure to work with, and I've had no concerns whatsoever. The culture is a good culture, a hard-working culture of teamwork and families. In fact, one of the reasons that Karen and me decided to move to Asia was because we felt that at the time, not now, Janice, but at the time we thought that the British family tradition was slowly waning, whereas in Asia Pacific the family core was strong and vibrant and important.
Yes.
And we wanted to instill that into our family.
That's interesting. So tell me about your family, because obviously Karen's with you, and Karen also works freelance in the industry as well, doesn't she?
She does, yes. She does journalism, and
yes.
We try not to step on each other's toes.
Do you find that? You must find that difficult.
Yeah, very. Sometimes I have to send her out the room when I have meetings so she doesn't listen to me.
She could be the mole, couldn't she?
She could well be, yes.
Yeah, she could be the mole. And also, are your family there as well? You have your daughters there, is that right?
My first wife, bless her, she died at the age of 29, so I have 4 children from her, which Karen helped to bring up from the age of, the youngest at the time was only 3.
Yeah.
And then we have 2 of our own, so 6 in total, of which...
You've got 6 children?
6 children. And so in Australia, we have 2 daughters and a son, and we have a lovely grandchild from our older daughter here. And in the UK, we have 2 daughters and a son. And from one of my daughters there, we have a granddaughter and a grandson.
Gosh.
But that's fairly typical for the McKenzies, because my family is spread across the world. I have a sister in Ohio. I have 2 brothers in the UK, one in the West Coast and one in the East Coast, and another sister in Leeds. So, and then of course me in Australia. Being part of a global trotting military family, we tend to get sprung and thrown into the seeds into the world.
I'm going to ask you a question, and I ask everybody now, before we sum up. Who are the top 3 people who have been the most influential to you in your working life?
Okay. I thought about this deeply. As I was growing up as a child, I was a bit of a rebel.
Were you?
I was. I was a bit of a rebel. I suppose it was because I was arriving in Bermuda at a young age. I was bullied because I was the son of an officer, and as a result of that, I became rebellious to fight against that. So the first person who made the greatest influence on me was my headmaster at my high school.
Wow!
Who took me under his wing and took me from being a semi-bad boy into being a prefect, and probably was the main person who changed my character from that point onwards. Bless him, he passed away 10 years ago, but he was a lovely man. The second one is a gentleman called Fred Jones. When you first met me at D.A. Stewart's, Fred Jones was the managing director of Stewart's, Stewart Ironside, it was at the time, in Wolverhampton. And it was my first step across from what I'd been doing in engineering to full-time the can-making industry, where I was involved with lubricants. And he was a lovely man, and he took me under his wing, and we became friends, and was a major influence to me as we moved through, and made me a major part of the can-making industry. The final person is a friend of mine, who still remains a friend of mine. I don't see him much these days, but Bob Gary at Stolly.
Oh, really? Oh, yes, I know him well. Yeah.
Yeah, Bob. When I worked for Stolly, Bob taught me to be a good manager, to be kind and understanding, and listen to people, and to look after the people who work for you, which is what Bob always did. And so, if I look back through my past, my old headmaster was the man who changed my character. Fred Jones brought me into the industry full time, and honed my technical skills. And then Bob Gary made me a better man and manager.
So how long ago was that? Can you remind me, when you worked for Stolly?
Up until 5 years ago. So I left Stolly in 2016.
It's interesting. So you are still learning and willing to learn, which is interesting, because that's what's really important.
Anybody who at any age who says, I can't learn anymore, should not be in the industry. Our industry is changing daily. As people, we're changing daily. And I look every day to become a better person, a better manager, and better at my skills.
Yes.
So I will continue, as I have done all my career, to learn and to get better at it by learning something new at least once every week.
So are you ever going to stop working?
I hope so, but not yet. I've often said that you work until you're not enjoying what you do.
Yes. Yeah.
The day you stop enjoying what you do is the day to give it up. And at the moment, I enjoy it thoroughly. Which
is fabulous, absolutely fabulous. So can I ask you to sum up really quickly, can you sum up SLAC in one sentence? What is it, a one-stop metal packaging shop for the industry? What is it, in your words?
The SLAC Group is the most comprehensive supplier of equipment for the industry. Everything from 2-piece through 3-piece, from coil to finished can. There isn't one part of that lineage which we don't have within our portfolio.
Lovely. That's just what I wanted to hear. My next final question is, so where can our listeners get in touch with you if they want to get advice, or if they want to find out more about SLAC, or to find out about electric cars even? Where can they contact you, Chris?
Well, if they go to our website, which is slac.com.cn, and you can either contact us through that, through any one of our offices, which is Intercan in the UK, Carema in Italy, SLAC Precision Equipment in Dayton, Ohio, or OKL. Any one of those will look after your needs. And, of course, they can always contact me.
Okay. So can I say, I'm sure you're on LinkedIn. So that's probably a good form of contact, isn't it?
I'm also on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yes. And we're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook.
Fantastic. Chris, thank you very, very much for the chat. I really enjoyed it. It's been really interesting. I thought I knew you, but now I know a little bit more about you.
Been a pleasure, Janet. I look forward to when we can see face to face again. It's been too long.
Yes, it has been too long.
At least 2 years.
Where would you be? Where would you be next? Do you know?
Well, I would imagine it's probably definitely going to be Metpac. Well, I know that Prague has been put back to 2022. Yeah. Metpac has been put back. Canix will be the next one, I think. Canix in China will be probably the next one.
Well, I hope to see you very soon, because we need to share a beer. Thank you very much again, Chris. Have a fabulous afternoon. It's been great.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you for listening to Canmaking News. This is episode 3, and I'd like to thank my guest, Chris McKenzie, who is the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Marketing Officer for the SLAC Group. I'd also like to thank Adrian once again, our wonderful producer, for making this podcast so perfect. We look forward to episode 4, which should be winging its way to you very soon. I should say good day, shouldn't I, really?
Yeah, not really. I remember that we were talking to somebody about GPRS, and it was Karen's brother who said, but you don't really need GPRS there, do you? And we went, no, we just stick a head up the top of the Jeep and we look and we can see for miles. Because people have this, they have this imagination that Australia is very much like like it used to be in The Flying Doctor or Crocodile Dundee. It's far from the truth these days.